Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
Welcome along to episode number 32 of Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast. We're back again with possibly the busiest episode we've ever had, I reckon. Shaping up to be a good one. With me, Dave D.
And me, Dave B.
And we have got for you a lovely interview with a brewery you might not have heard of, but he's knocking out some really excellent beers. Dolphin from Reading. Andy, the main man, joins us. I met him at the Craft Theory Festival recently, then he decided he'd come and talk to us, and he's here with some really interesting stuff. And talking about really interesting stuff, Dave.
Wild Beer Brewing, they got in touch with us as they are 3 parts of the way through a series of beers which are all about thiols. That was a word that we weren't particularly familiar with to begin with, and luckily you get a really good explanation about what thiols are and how they affect beer, and it's a really interesting listen and, more importantly, a really interesting taste.
Now we've also got a brand new feature. We are launching something a little bit different because there's very few female voices in craft beer, so we thought we were going to throw this on its head and talk to the wife of a craft beer brewer. So we are introducing to you the first of a brand new series called The Brewer's Wife. We're not going to tell you any more. You have to wait and see who it is and what they've got to say, but they'll be on every episode with some really interesting and thought-provoking content, so stay tuned for that.
And of course, alongside all of these new goodies, we have our usual favourites like Hype or Tripe. It fills the brief so easily as it's Tiny Rebel, and it is their 10% take on one of their existing beers, and that just seemed like an open goal to do Hype or Tripe with. There's Tried and Tested, and of course, as we start every episode with, Brew to Me.
So let's kick on with that straight away. Dave, over to you. Whose beer are you sampling this time that you've never had before?
There's 2 interesting things to this. It's Bullhouse Brewing, who probably some people who are listening to this will have had. I haven't. They're from Northern Ireland. They're not the easiest to get hold of usually. They were about for a bit and then seemed to become a bit trickier to get hold of. But this beer represents the first beer I'm trying out of my new Bruiser subscription box. I took the plunge, sharing the box with a friend. So we're going to get the different boxes and we're going to see what we discover. And Bullhouse first up.
It's a great way to find breweries whose beers you haven't had before, because there's over 100 different breweries involved with Bruiser now, and you can pick and choose and switch breweries for each delivery, can't you?
Exactly, and there's plenty on there actually which I haven't had, which was part of the appeal as much as anything, just to try and find some new breweries a bit easier than hunting them down on the internet and things like that, which is still very fun, but this does make life slightly easier. So we got 10 beers in there. There were 4 different beers, and the one that I am trying is Suds, which is right up my street as it's a 4.5% DDH pale. So, you know, the kind of beer I will go to as my go-to all the time.
Yeah, this is what you'd be pulling out the fridge after a day at work, isn't it? Not too heavy.
Exactly.
So, what's it look like in the glass, Dave?
It's the usual bright sort of yellow haziness. It's not perhaps quite as full as I thought it would be. On the can, it says there's no description of what hops are involved, but it does say that it's got some oats in it. So I would expect it to be maybe a little bit fuller in the body than it actually looks. Okay, well, to taste, it's probably not quite as soft as I would have hoped it would be. It's not sort of bitter or anything like that. There is a little bit of bitterness, but it's not maybe quite as full and as soft as I thought it would be. Like if you're thinking Daya, it's not quite at that level, but it's very sessionable. I would say quite citrusy, not sort of that tropical, more citrusy taste, but very easy to keep coming back to. And so there's a first beer from them. I'm interested to see what else I've got in the box to try.
I remember having one from them which sticks in my mind. It was called Colonel Custard, and I think it was a raspberry and custard type sour. Have you got any sours in there to try from them?
I do have a sour, actually. We've got a sour, another DDH pale, and a dipper. So yes, we'll be trying the sour. I think the sour was the one we got the most of, actually.
Oh, excellent. Well, you're coming to see me soon. Make sure it's in the car, won't you?
Yeah, well, yeah, fair's fair, actually. Otherwise, they'll just sit there and I'll try one and then I'll forget about it. So yes, it should go to a good home.
Well, it sounds like that's not a bad first beer from Bullhouse for you.
No, solid, I would say. It's not going to be one I'm going to remember in weeks' time, and I'll definitely have it again from someone else, but it's a perfectly solid beer.
Yeah, you're not going to remember every individual beer you ever drink, are you?
No, but that I won't remember. I won't remember it because it was unpleasant. It will just go in the pile of nice, solid beer.
Excellent. Well, hopefully mine matches up to yours. I'm in Scotland again, as I seem to have been for every episode for ages now. Because when I went to Finefest, I grabbed loads of Scottish beers from breweries some of them I hadn't heard of, some of them I hadn't tried, and this time I've got a beer from Inner Bay Brewery, which is an artisanal family-run brewery that uses traditional ingredients and methods, produced in small batches, ensuring the highest quality and flavour experience. Now, I've got a beer called Opal, which is right up your street, Dave, because this is an award-winning wheat beer infused with whole raspberries, locally sourced in Scotland. 6%. Ooh. So this promises a great deal, doesn't it?
It does. I'm fascinated to see what colour you're going to get. Are you going to get a traditional wheat beer colour, which is sort of quite... it's quite orangey normally, or even it can be a bit yellowy as well. Or is it going to be all the raspberries and you're going to have a very red beer?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I've got the sort of straw colour in my mind, but I've just poured a little bit out here, and it is actually got quite a nice pink tinge to it.
Oh yeah, I can see what you mean. It's not sort of, it's not like the pink when you get a raspberry sour, for example, or anything like that.
It's not that deep and obviously not as thick as some of those sours. In fact, it's not thick at all, is it, being a wheat beer? I'm intrigued to see what this tastes like now, whether the raspberries really shine through. I'm guessing with a wheat beer, you've often got that sort of banana-y and clovey type thing. So let's try this now.
Yeah, it should be pretty sweet. As you say, bananas usually to the fore with a little bit of clovey sort of spiciness on the back end.
Definitely there's some spice, some bit of spiciness at the back. And then, that banana is gone, and what you've got is raspberries to the fore.
And are they tart raspberries or are they quite sweet raspberries?
It sounds like your dog wants some.
It's not my dog.
Oh, is it not yours? No, he can wait. Yeah, quite sweet. That's really good, actually. I like that. This isn't the sort of beer I would gravitate to. Actually, Lisa picked it out of the off the shelf in the Oban beer cellar. So I've got to keep some of this for her. But this is good. I definitely have more of their stuff.
I was going to say, is it going to be a struggle keeping hold of some for Lisa?
Yeah, I'm so tempted to go back in again and have a bit more. That is good. 2 good beers then.
Definitely. I don't think their stuff's quite as easy to get hold of, is it? Because I would like to try that, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get it very easily.
They're based in Inverkeithing, so just over the other side of the Forth Bridge. And I sort of had a little look to see where you can get their stuff from. There's the shop that I got it from in Oban and about 10 other places locally in Scotland, including a bowls club. So if you fancy a game of Crown Green Bowls one day and you're in the area, you might get a bit of Inner Bay Brewery to go with it. Well, regular listeners to the podcast will know that on the last episode I talked about the Craft Theory Festival in Reading that I went to, and it was there that I met Andy from Dolphin Brewery, and he joins us now. How's it going, Andy?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm very excited because you're the king of sours in Berkshire, aren't you? So this is right up my street.
Do you know, I have actually been referred as that. Once before I was at a beer festival and someone shouted the Sour King at me.
Well, having tasted a few of your beers at Craft Theory, they were really good, and I'm really excited. We've got a few beers here to drink as we question you. I was trying to get hold of your beers for ages, and you're very small, so it's difficult to get hold of them, but when I did, I was so pleased I got them. Anybody listening to this who likes sours, they've really got to try and track down some of your beers, because I'm sure they won't be disappointed. Now, look, why don't you tell people how long you've been going, how it all started, that sort of thing?
My name's Andy. I co-run Dolphin Brew with my wife, Laura. The brewery is based in Reading, and we operate in a garage. So it's just a normal residential garage. The doors were closed. You wouldn't even know that there was a brewery there. Yeah, the garage is at my parents' house, which, brewing in a garage and the garage being at my parents' house certainly presents some interesting challenges. But yeah, we've been going since 2020. So we launched peak COVID times, which wasn't ideal, but being a small brewery, it wasn't too problematic. We certainly didn't face a lot of the issues that much bigger breweries facing at the time. And we primarily, as you say, make sour beers. They're almost all most of them are fruited sours. We try and use kind of fresh fruit where possible, and we process that fruit ourselves and pasteurize it to use in the beers. But we've been selling locally primarily. And there's been one occasion where the beers have kind of gone slightly further afield. But we sell at the local farmers market and local bottle shops, and that's pretty much it, really.
You mentioned about the fruit element. Is there always loads of fruit at your house then, waiting to go into beers?
Kind of. We've had to kind of expand freezer space somewhat because we basically go through this process where we either buy fruit frozen or we buy fresh fruit. We then chop it up or blitz it or blend it, depending kind of what type of fruit it is. That fruit is then vacuum sealed and then kind of pasteurized in kind of hot water for a period of time. And then we tend to then freeze it until we're ready to use it. So we're trying to get the brewery to be kind of as seasonal as possible. So I like to be able to buy the fruit when it's in season. I'm getting better at that. Often I tend to think about what fruit I need when that fruit isn't in season. So it requires a bit of forward planning. We went to a local farm last week where I picked lots of hybrid berries, which are now in a freezer ready for next year. So there are kind of there is, shall I say, lots of fruit kind of in freezers ready to use in a forthcoming beer.
One of the things that struck me about your beers when I tasted them for the first time is that those fruited sours really do taste of the fruit that they're meant to. Some sours you can have and you think, I can't really identify what fruit this is. But yours, wow. If it's a raspberry sour, you know it. If it's rhubarb, you know it.
That was kind of the intention when we thought about the style of sour beers that we were trying to make. We don't tend to overdo the fruit. The beers are generally fairly light in kind of consistency, but the intention is that they should represent the fruit as much as possible. And I think kind of using fruit in the way that we do, and we always try and use the whole fruit, so we don't remove the skins or we don't remove elements of the fruit that in some processing might be discarded. I hope that kind of best represents the fruit. I imagine if there are people in the brewing industry listening to this is a process that is perfectly manageable on a small scale, and they're probably thinking, how is he going to manage that as he scales the brewery? I want to try and keep that part of it if possible. I think that character of the fruit comes through in a way that I'm really pleased with, and I'm definitely thinking about how I can scale that up. It will limit the size of the brewery because I will never be able to be a particularly big brewery if I go down that avenue, but I do think I can do it on a bigger scale than I'm doing it at the moment.
You love your sours, Dave loves the sours. I'm still learning with the sours. It's something I really haven't been that wild about, but as over time and doing this podcast, I got into it more. So why sours for you? What's got you on the path to these?
Personally, I do enjoy drinking sour beers, but I don't drink sour beers exclusively. I like I like most styles, to be honest, and I tend to find a style that I like for whatever mood I'm in. When I was a home brewer, I was trying to brew lots of different things and to varying levels of success. I just felt like the sours was the style that I was kind of nailing the kind of the most. I also became really interested in kind of microbes and yeast and bacteria and different kind of species and how they can derive different flavors and tastes in the beer. I then entered a local home brewing competition with a nectarine sour, which was a home brewing competition that was run by the Grumpy Goat Beer and Cheese Shop, which I also now happen to work for. Yeah, that beer came first, and it was the first recognition or endorsement for my beers that I'd had. It was judged by publicans or people that work for other local breweries. And to be honest, I just felt like I was onto a good thing. And it was also something that was possible to do at a level of a standard that I was happy with on the kit that I had. I didn't have a canning machine. I was concerned about levels of oxygen. I couldn't get access to the best hops. And I thought, rather than trying to be second best at other styles, I'm just going to focus in on this and try and be really good at it.
It seems to have worked. So when was that nectarine sour winning the competition then? How long have you been doing this now?
That was 2019. That was before we turned the brewery into something that was commercial. So that was still essentially home brewing at that point. Yeah, it was after that, and I was studying. So I graduated in 2019 as well. And kind of having done both of those things, it kind of created an extra kind of impetus to move things forward a little bit.
And what did you graduate in?
So, yeah, I became a ridiculously overqualified home brewer. So I was,
you weren't going to tell us that, were you?
I was only going to tell you if you asked. Yeah, I was studying a brewing science master's degree, part-time at Nottingham University. It was supposed to be a 3-year course. It took me 5. It was really difficult to fit it in with a kind of a full-time job and a life. And yeah, having eventually kind of got to the end of that and was able to kind of pass fairly well at it. I thought, well, I can't not let this studying.
Dave's just poured a beer. What have you poured, Dave?
So I've opened Juggler, which is a raspberry sour, 5.3%. It is an amazing red colour, full on raspberries, and it's very full on raspberries on the nose, as you were saying, Dave, that when these beers say they're going to smell and taste of the fruit, they do. So
the colour in this particular beer, is that all from the fruit?
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
It's this isn't a particularly overcomplicated beer. Essentially, my kind of base sour recipe with a fairly standard yeast, the bacteria culture I use, and then it's just been aged on raspberries for a period of time.
That's why I went for this one. I thought I'll just ease myself in gently here. I'll let Dave tackle the more complicated stuff. I really like that. It's tart. We've had a couple of it was a staggeringly good recently, which sort of tried to say it was a sour, didn't it, Dave? That green one, that was so sweet. I can tell there's no lactose or anything hanging around in this.
No, there isn't. It's the sort of, in terms of the style that I'm trying to create, they tend not to be too sweet. There is some residual sweetness from the fruit sugars, but there isn't too much sugar left in there.
I find that more and more now, it annoys me when sours are sweet. I think it's not really achieving what it sets out to do.
No, I do try and make sure that my sours are sour. I don't really know how sour that is anymore. I think my taste buds in terms of all my sour scale has gone a bit array. We do tend to find that people who aren't overly keen on sours do find something in the beer to appreciate. We sell at the local farmers market. It's probably not necessarily the audience that you'd expect to be sour beer fans. No. And often, I think because the beers try and represent the fruit, and they're often not too much more sour than the actual level of acidity that you would find in a raspberry, they're not too inaccessible, I hope.
Well, I've just opened one as well. I've got Skipper, the Sea Buckthorn Saison.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then after I've had this, we've all got an unlabelled bottle, haven't we? A mystery bottle. I think we should all drink that one. Tell us about this about Skipper then. 6% Sea Buckthorn Saison.
It's a fairly kind of crisp, dry saison with a Belgian saison yeast. It was aged on sea buckthorn. I had a beer. I tried a beer by a Cornish brewery, and they used sea buckthorn in it, and I quite liked that beer. I think I found the only place where you could like a sea buckthorn farm, which sent me some of their sea buckthorn berries. Yeah, the sea buckthorn berries were aged in the beer for 3 or 4 weeks, I think.
So is tracking down weird and wonderful fruits a big interest for yours as well? I guess it must be.
I do enjoy that. Yeah, I'm always thinking of what I can add to the beer to add some like interesting flavours or something that's not necessarily used before. I mean, I do really like using things that are grown either locally or in this country where I can. There's lots of great UK growers, and there's lots of things that you can forage for. I don't forage for things enough yet because I'm still kind of learning kind of what's available and when you can find it. But it's definitely the sort of direction that I'd like to go in. One of the beers that we had at Craft Theory is called Soprano, which was an elderflower and white grape sour, and that had lots of foraged elderflowers in it. I went out early for a couple of days to get the elderflowers that was required for that beer. So so I definitely want to try and find new things and forage for things where I can.
Dave, that sea buckthorn then, what or Andy as well. What is that tasting of? Because I'm not that familiar with sea buckthorn as what it's supposed to sort of impart as a flavour.
I think sea buckthorn is one of those things that if we didn't drink craft beers, we'd never have heard of. And I think there's a lot of fruits around like that. Tayberries, that's another one I see pop up every now and again.
Yeah, I picked some of those the last week actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've never even seen one before. But I mean, I get kind of quite a tangerine, kind of orangey kind of character from it. If you were to eat it, it's not kind of hugely pleasant just to kind of eat the berry as it is. It has quite a sharpness to it, and there's kind of like quite a deep kind of herbally, kind of fruity tangerine character, which I'm not sure if that sounds overly appealing, but I think it does definitely kind of help to balance out some of the dryness in the beer and lower the acidity slightly.
I say it's not your traditional saison, is it, by any stretch of the imagination?
Yeah, I think it's definitely got enough of that saison character. I mean, the saison yeast has added some of that kind of aromatic kind of saison flavour that you probably expect. But I think the addition of the sea buckthorn certainly adds some fruitiness. It's been dry hopped with not necessarily traditional kind of saison hops, which has kind of accentuated that fruity character somewhat.
The colour is awesome, Dave, isn't it? Look at that.
Yeah, I noticed that when you were drinking it earlier. The colour, like when I think of a saison, I think of a deeper brown. Isn't the right word, but I think you know the colour I sort of mean. That sort of vinous-y type
Rusty.
colour. And rusty. That's not a bad shout. And thinner as well. That looks quite thick.
Yeah, it does actually. I don't know if it's just the light. But
I think the light's probably contributing a little bit. It's not as thick as it looks, but I've got to say it is so easy drinking, and this is a theme I've noticed with all of the beers I've had from you now, which is quite a few. I could just sit here and drink it straight off in one, I think,
Yeah, I mean, as a drinker, I do enjoy drinkability in a beer. I think that's really important. I like the sort of beers that you can kind of have more than one of. It's difficult with sours because you're not going to kind of just start knocking back pints of the fruited sour, but I do want someone to feel like it's not a struggle to get to the end of the glass. So they are deliberately kind of light. They're not, as I say, not too thick. They're supposed to have a certain level of drinkability. They tend not to be too strong or like high in alcohol content, generally around kind of 5 to 6%. So yeah, they are designed to be drinkable, really.
So talk a little bit about your kit. We didn't ask you, what size kit are you working on?
Yeah, so the kit is really small. So it's a US 1-barrel kit. And essentially that outputs around 120, 130 litres. Yeah, I mean, technically I should be able to output 140 something litres, but I never get anywhere close to that because I lose too much beer from the fruit that I put into the beers. So yeah, so it's around 120, 130 litres. So really small. I've got a fermenter, a unitank, and a bright tank all at that scale. And I recently acquired another tank which can go up to about 150 to 200 litres from a local brewery. So I'm squeezing a lot into the garage. They're all very small vessels, but I'm trying to squeeze in as many as possible, really.
So you're squeezing a lot in a small space by the sounds of it, and you've already sort of hinted that you're not too worried about trying to become the Vault City of Berkshire or something, for example. What are you sort of thinking medium long term? So how do you want to take things forward if you can?
I need to move out the garage. So I've been doing it for a couple of years. It is enjoyable. I do really enjoy it. It's been really great actually and I've been fortunate that I've been able to start a brewery with minimal overheads because it's essentially at my parents' house, and I've been able to get that brewery to a point where I'm able to do things that I kind of never would have thought would have been possible in that space. But it definitely needs to be moved forward because it's a lot of effort for quite a small amount of output, and it's also fun, but it's not commercially viable to brew on that scale. I can't pay myself a salary or anything like that. So growth is something that is going to happen, but I'm not thinking kind of super big. It might be no more than 5 barrels, so it would be like 800 litres as opposed to 100 and something. So kind of an 8 times increase.
Still pretty big.
Pretty sizable, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so, but it's largely because I want to keep things kind of manageable myself, so I don't want to. If
You don't want to delegate, do you?
Well, yeah, yeah.
That's a no.
I just kind of, I'm conscious about cost. I know that I need to keep my fixed costs low. I'm trying to work on business case at the moment and looking at different scenarios. And I know that if I need to keep my fixed costs low. I don't want to be a huge brewery, so I'm not sure I'm going to get to the point where I will be able to employ anyone certainly in the near future. So I need to ensure that I'm not doing lots of brews. It needs to be big enough that I'm not brewing all the time or cleaning tanks all the time, or packaging all the time. Yeah, 800 litres though would probably require about 200 kilos of fruit. So that's that definitely will.
So how many kilos of fruit do you need at the moment then?
It depends really. It depends on what fruit I use, but it's somewhere between 20 to 30 something kilos of fruit tend to be used. So it's
that's still a fair whack, isn't it?
That's
it's a decent amount. Yeah, it's something that takes a fair amount of processing. The way that I intend to do it in the future will probably be less labour intensive because I've got a potential way of doing it. It will be time consuming, but it won't be as time consuming kind of proportionally as it is at the moment.
Got to ask this question. We're talking about the garage. I've just got visions of this car that's been on a drive somewhere for a couple of years that can't get into the garage. Is there a car?
There is actually, yeah. There's a couple because there's quite a long driveway that goes down to the garage. There is a couple of cars and one that hasn't moved for a while. I'm not sure that car was ever in the garage.
I was just sort of thinking one day when you do size up and move out of the garage, that car will be able to go back to its home.
Well, do you know, I have kind of suggested to my parents that even when I move on, and I'm not sure whether they're going to be happy or sad about that, but I've got future uses for the garage in terms of freezer space.
Ah, okay. The car's not going anywhere then, is it?
The car's not going back in the garage. and also I do intend, one of the future plans is to buy barrels. That's the direction of travel really. Brew into barrels, and I want to be kind of aging beer and blending beer.
Wow. I'm drinking this and you drinking yours, Dave. I can just imagine what these would taste like if they'd been in barrels for 9 months or a year or whatever. It'd be awesome. Yeah,
I really love beers that have been aged in barrels, and I mean the beers that I make at the moment probably take up to, well, the quickest it tends to be about 5 weeks, but they can take longer than that. But I do like different yeast species and bacteria species and microbes in general, and I am fascinated by barrels and the beers that can be produced from them.
This seems to be an area of the craft scene that's growing and growing, the barrel side of things. Everybody's got a little barrel project on the side these days.
Yeah, there's definitely brewers that are doing it as a kind of a side thing, and then brewers which are doing it as a primary thing, as a kind of a research trip. I did a little tour of some of the breweries that have barrel programs earlier in the year. I went to see James at Wilderness, Pastore, and a couple of others. It was a great opportunity for me to kind of ask questions and to kind of infuse direction of travel that I hope to go in.
It's a very loose point, but I think there probably needs to be more made of people like yourself who would talk about the barrel, but actually want to do it as the main thing. Like Epochel was the same when we had him on, that's the thing. There's a bit for me, and Dave and I have talked about this before, where some of the more bigger breweries have almost done this as a bit of an afterthought because it's the thing that they should be doing. Oh yeah, we've done a barrel-aged beer. I hope that this sort of scene continues to evolve a bit, and then there's a real thing of, oh, well, if you want a really good barrel beer, like these are the people who are actually dedicated to it rather than just doing it as a bit of an offshoot.
Yeah, I think most brewers or breweries that I've spoken to, they all really like the idea of barrel aging beers and having a barrel aging program. I think it's just sometimes it's quite challenging to do that when you have got when your focus is elsewhere. But there definitely are breweries that are really focused on barrel aged beers as a style in itself. And
I think our feeling is we almost wish the guys who do it really well focus all their energies into doing it, and the other guys who just pop something into a barrel for a few weeks so they can release something barrel aged would leave it alone and concentrate on your other stuff.
Yeah, I think having expertise in something or anything really is a good thing. It's all well and good trying to do lots of different styles, but it's good to have breweries that are specialising. I feel like the kind of mixed sour scene it's growing,
isn't it?
Yeah, I think it really is, and I'm definitely getting a lot of support and help and direction from those breweries. And there's really great scenes in the US and in Belgium and things like that. And it feels like the UK scene is kind of up there now with some great sour focused breweries.
Right, so we've all got this bottle. Now, do you want to tell us what's in this mystery bottle?
Yes, I mean, the only reason it's a mystery bottle is that I haven't quite received labels for it yet. It was a beer that we had on keg at Craft Theory Festival, and it's a blackcurrant sour saison blend. Essentially with this, I made my base sour. I then made a rye saison. Those were blended together, blackcurrants, and it was aged on blackcurrants. I think this one was aged for like 10 weeks, maybe. I had to age some beers leading up to Craft Theory because I had 4 draft beers available at Craft Theory, and it was difficult for me to get them all ready at the same time. So I had to put some away so that then they could be ready for Craft Theory. So this was one of those beers.
So I had this at Craft Theory.
The colour of it is absolutely fantastic. It's an incredible colour.
It is, yeah. It has got that kind of deep kind of purple character that's come through from the blackcurrants. But the intention really was the reason why I kind of blended the sour and the saison together is that the blackcurrants are in fact quite intense and quite super hard, and the intention was to kind of mellow that out a bit to just add some extra complexity. A lot of the other sours, well, they tend to have a certain level of complexity, but this one I was kind of bigging up the complexity a bit by blending the two beers together. Then the rye saison kind of accentuates some of the earthy characters that you get from the blackcurrant.
That is one intense beer, isn't it?
It really is. That first hit of it is really blackcurrant to start with, and then it really mellows off. And then I'm trying to work out what it's doing a bit, and that makes me want to keep coming back, which I guess is a complexity you were hoping for, because it doesn't go full saison.
Saison is about a third of the blend, so it was 2/3 sour and about a third saison. But the blend happened when the saison use was quite active, so the beer is fairly dry. The terminal gravity is fairly low. There is some kind of saison yeast derived kind of character in there. It was quite bubble gummy for a period of time, but it does seem to be a beer that's evolving somewhat. It tastes slightly different every time I try it.
I'd love to have 3 bottles of this. Try one now, try one in a month's time, then a month again, because I bet that's changed loads. And I would even imagine perhaps we've got 3 beers and we might be getting different stuff off it.
Yeah, I think all sorts of things are going to impact this beer. There's kind of the serving temperature is going to bring out kind of different flavors. When this beer was on keg, again, it tasted slightly different. It's a beer that's definitely evolved. So yeah, I have some bottles left, so maybe I'll put them aside and we can try it again one day.
So the beers you served at Craft Theory, there were 4 of them. This is one of them. Are they all being bottled?
They all have been bottled. So they were bottled at the same point as I kegged the beers. There isn't a lot of bottles of them because, as you can imagine, with my kit size being so small.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say, if people do want to get hold of them, and we urge them to, what outlets are they got to go to get them?
Well, they're going to go to the Reading Farmers Market.
What a great excuse to go to Reading Farmers.
I know, yeah. And to be honest, when I say there's not many bottles of them, there really isn't that many bottles of them. The most that I think Composer, I have maybe up to 100 bottles. The others are maybe 50 bottles, 70 bottles. The farmers market's happening first, and so whatever stock I have left after the farmers market is then getting distributed between kind of the local stockists. So the Grumpy Goat will get some. They do national delivery. Hoppy Place in Windsor and now Maidenhead, and they do national delivery. And then anyone in the local area can go to the Hive or the Tasting Barn, which are my other stockists.
And talking about the local area, I was amazed that the scene you've got in Reading now, it is colossal.
Yeah, it is really good. Reading is definitely getting better and better. I mean, there's some in central Reading and there's some in the outskirts. So we've now got Double Barreled and Phantom with really great tap rooms in Reading. We've got Siren and Elusive, which is just outside. We've got Wild Weather, and yeah, they're a great beer pub. And the Grumpy Goat, which is an excellent beer and cheese shop, is opening a craft beer bar on the top floor of the premises where we trade from.
Just to touch on the Grumpy Goat, while we're chatting, I'm just having a little surf. I feel like you might be influencing what's on there, because didn't get very far down. Then Little Earth Project have popped up, and then Yonder as well. So are you having an influence on what's going in here?
Because I only work there part time, but I definitely feel like I share a kind of the sort of drinks that I like are also the drinks that the owners like. There's plenty of really good mixed ferment sour beers in the Grumpy Goat. There's beers really good, but we do all sorts of good beers and cheese and wines and spirits.
Oh, wouldn't some cheese go well with this beer? Oh my goodness.
I was thinking that while I'm sort of just having a little peruse, and I'm just quite interested as well because I can see you obviously support the local guys, and there's I think there's one I've seen there who I don't recognise already, which is very exciting because that probably means I can be talked into doing an order at some point as well.
Yeah, the Grumpy Goat's great craft beer shop. It's been going for 8 years. It probably predates a lot of the local breweries, so they've seen the beer scene in Reading change quite a lot, and yeah, it's quite unusual to have beer and cheese, and cheese is also available for national delivery. And
trip to Reading sometime soon, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'll plan a little itinerary.
Awesome. So, Dave, as somebody whose passion for sours isn't quite the same as mine, how have you enjoyed those beers?
I think, as a wider point, it's quite interesting because I think now, as Andy sort of said when we've been talking away, sours aren't probably quite what they used to be. This whole mixed blend and the fermentation projects and things like that are going on, that's taken it forward. And now I can see a way how I can get into this because I mentioned Little Earth just now. Andy, you know Little Earth well. You were just at their festival and they're close to me, and I've sort of tried a bit of their stuff and I really like their stuff. And it seems like that kind of fermentation, soury type beers, I can really get on board with all that. And these really fit into that, which is really nice. And I can drink more of these. I think it's just the more older style sour beer, which I don't think you get as much of now. That's what's always put me off.
You know, when we first started this podcast, I used to like sours with lactose and all this stuff. Now I'm like, please don't put that in my beer anymore. Tastes have changed, haven't they, even in the last couple of years?
I think they have. I think you often find with anything, I guess, that things go in trends, and as people palates evolve, different beers and different ways of making beers become more or less popular. I mean, one of the things I like actually about working part time in a craft beer shop is that I get to see kind of firsthand kind of consumer behavior and what people are buying, and you definitely a shift, and it seems to happen en masse. People all of a sudden kind of start moving away from a certain style or coming towards a different one. And
so you can keep on top of all that then.
As much as I enjoy working there just because I enjoy beer and it's great to work in a beer shop, but I also find value in doing it from the brewery perspective, because it's really, it allows me to see what breweries are releasing and how breweries approach if they can or bottle art and how they present their beers and all sorts of stuff, and what people like and what people are buying, and talking to customers. And we don't have a tap room, so it's really great to chat to people, and the beer shop is a good way of doing that.
On a wider point, given the economic climate at the moment, have you seen people's buying habits changed in the bowl shop?
I have, to an extent. There are definitely things that I'm noticing. I mean, people are not buying double IPAs or triple IPAs in the same level as they used to be. I mean, those beers used to fly off the shelves, and unfortunately there are occasions, and those occasions are happening more frequently, that where those beers reach their best before date, and we have to remove them from the shelf or discount them or whatever is appropriate. So, and I don't know if that's a financial thing, or just whether that's because those beers tend to be the most expensive, or whether that's just a shift in drinking patterns. People are still coming into the shop, they're still buying beers, but I think it's evident that financial bit is kind of a consideration.
I think with me and Dave, when we first started the podcast and we really got into our craft beers, it was the start of lockdown. There wasn't a great deal going on, and we just throw our cash, whatever money we did have, at beers. But times have changed a lot in those 2 years, and now, we really think about the beers we buy. We don't just buy whatever there is just because we can. We really think about it, don't we? We only buy it if we want it, and I guess a lot of people must be behaving in the same way.
I think they are. I mean, it's really challenging for breweries at the moment, and I'm noticing it on a small scale, but I can kind of absorb it to a different level because my costs are different. But like, the cost of everything is going up, and it's going up by quite a lot in instances. There is literally nothing that is an element of the brewing process that isn't being impacted by inflation, and costs are going up for beer in a context where people have less money to spend. So yeah, people are going to be more conscious about how they spend their money, and they're either going to buy less beer or just be more selective with the beers that they're buying.
Well, your beers are very reasonably priced anyway, so I can recommend those to anybody.
Yeah, yeah, I do try, and I really want them to be accessible to people. I really hate the idea of pricing people out, and I think there will be some contexts where my beers will be expensive in certain bottle shops, for example, but when I go to the local farmers market, I want them to be as accessible as they can be from a price perspective to as many people as possible. If they're too expensive, then people aren't going to buy them. Oh, they're not going to try them for the first time. That's probably a better way of saying it. So
it's not just Andy who is responsible for Dolphin. Andy's wife, Laura, is also a major part.
It's me kind of semi-full-time. And Laura has a full-time job, but outside of that time, she tries to help me out with the brewery as much as I can. So she does a lot of the social media. Yeah, she provides quite a lot of emotional support every time I'm releasing a new beer, stressing out about it. So yeah, she's definitely a big part of it too.
It's so interesting. We hear this so much, don't we, Dave? That
if you want to be a success in craft beer, you're a husband and wife team, or that seems a real good theme.
I think so. I think I would struggle to do it because it's just that kind of support when you're getting to, even though we've now released a number of beers actually over the last couple of years and have had decent feedback for them. I can't help but, I don't know, you're your own worst critic, and if you're really passionate about something, you want it to be good. It's difficult not to care a lot about it, and I'm not sure I taste the beer objectively because I've been involved in every element of it. So it's definitely some kind of support and reassurance when you're releasing something.
When you're putting a beer out there that you've worked so hard on, and you need somebody there to give you some honest feedback, don't you? You know, and to spur you on.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, for ages I was because the brewery's at my parents' house, and so they were often around when I was sampling beers and I was asking them for feedback. But I mean, they everything was nice. There wasn't much more critique than that. So it is actually one of the most challenging things, I think, of being like trying to run a brewery on your own. Chatting to other local breweries and other brewers, and they often ask me, well, how do you do that? Because they work in a brewing team, they're all trying it, they're all talking about kind of what they think of it. When you're just having to try and use your own kind of palate and your own opinion on what something's like, that can be quite difficult because you're kind of second guessing yourself and you're trying to kind of work things out and just determine how other people are going to receive something. So it is good to have someone who's going to like tell you how it is, and who's going to say if it's not very good, or try and boost your confidence if it is tasting okay.
So if people want to find out more about Dolphin, dolphinbrewery.co.uk is your website. You're on the socials as well. Follow you. Instagram's probably the best place to follow you, isn't it?
Yeah. We tend to kind of cross-post most of our kind of updates on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter, but Instagram's the most visual, so we post a lot of the nice pictures on there. So yeah, occasionally I do a blog, but I haven't done one for a long time. There are some blogs on the website to read some of the background of the brewery.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've got loads of bottles of Dolphin in the fridge downstairs, and I feel the need to go and grab some more. I might do that. But look, thank you so much for joining us, and we will no doubt meet you again in the future. Looking forward to it.
Great, yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
Get in touch with us on Twitter and Instagram at Daftaboutcraft1.
Well, on each and every episode, we'd like to tell you the beer we've enjoyed the most since our previous episode. And we call this little feature Tried and Tested. I'm going a bit retro here for my taste. I'm going Vault City, who used to appear in this feature for me all the time. Haven't had as much of their beer as recently as I have in the past, but I have had one which really sticks in my mind. It was their blackberry, raspberry, heather, honey, fruited sour, 9%. Sounds like there's a hell of a lot going on there, but I can tell you it didn't taste anything like 9%. It was actually really, really drinkable, and it had this lovely honey note running all the way through. Subtle honey, not cloying sweetness, just this lovely aroma and sweet taste from the honey. It's beautiful. Backed up with the blackberries and raspberries. It was really awesome. There's not many beers we have twice, is there? But that's one I would go back to and have again, no questions asked. What about you?
I would happily have my beer twice, 3 times. And like you, mine's a bit retro actually, because mine is a German beer and it is Schlenker Eiche Doppelbock. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, the Schlenker is when you go to a Belgian bar or a foreign bar or anything like that, or Beers of Europe, the Schlenker bonds are the brown bottles and it's that sort of yellowy, browny label with the red writing. What sets their beers apart is they are smoked. And I remember, and they're smoked on beechwood. And I remember having one of these over a decade ago now, sadly, and just hating it. I didn't understand it. I thought it tasted like, it smelt and tasted a bit like hot dogs and hot dog flavoured water. For those of a certain vintage and the Limp Bizkit album, that references. But anyway, I hated it. I did not like it or understand it. Goes to show how tastes change, because I tried it again a few years later and loved it, and I now love the Schlenker stuff. I really love smoked beers now. And anyway, this is the Doppelbock. It's 8%, smoky hit to start with, and it smells a bit like a bonfire, and then it tastes a little bit smoky as well, but then it's sweet at the back with the malt and everything. It's just great. It, like I say, it's probably a little bit niche, won't be to everyone's taste, but if you like the sound of it, I would say hunt it out and go for the normal Rausch beer. That's the style a smoked beer is, a Rausch beer. Go for the Rausch beer, their normal one to start with, see how you find that, and then if you like that, I'd always recommend the Doppelbock.
Look, the more niche, the better as far as I'm concerned. It's what we like to drink. If you want to tell us what you've been drinking, Instagram is the way to do it. Drop us a message on there, let us know, and we'll give you a mention on our next episode. I've got to say thanks to Mark Ramsey. He lets us know that he was at a festival in Stonehaven called the Midsummer Beer Happening. He says his beer highlights were the Bourbon Barrel-Aged Mexicake by Tempest, which I remember having a couple of years ago. It's very good. Resonate IPA, Dog Falls and Rooted in Time by Burnside. So lots there. And also, thanks for letting us know that, Mark. He also let us know he's had our last Hype or Tripe beer, which was the Time and Tide collaboration, which he enjoyed very much. He thought it was hype as well. So nice to know that we aren't the only ones who really enjoyed that beer.
Daftaboutcraft.
Right, well, at the top of the show, we said we'd been contacted by Wild Beer recently, and indeed we have, and they were really keen to send us a new beer they've released, which was actually the third beer in a series in which they're investigating thiols. Dave, what's your knowledge on thiols?
It was incredibly non-existent until Wild Beer contacted us, basically, and then I had a little Google, but Brett and Sam from Wild Beer explain a lot more about them, and also a lot better than I can. I wasn't really aware of what they were.
The guys from Wild are going to explain all about it. So may as well hand over to them, and you can have a listen to what they've got to say.
How's it going, Daves? Is Brett from Wild Beer Company, and Sam's here.
Sam Shrimpton, both of us from the Wild Beer Co.
I set up the business with Andrew Cooper 10 years ago, and it's been a wild ride. What about you, Sam? What's your background?
I've been brewing for 25 years, so kind of did a postgrad diploma in brewing and distilling at Heriot Watt, and then have worked for large breweries and small breweries here and in New Zealand, Australia. So been at Wild Beer for 5 years and been loving every minute of it.
Cry of the Coast is a beer that we've done in a kind of a series of beers, right? About thiols and discovering, for some of the team here, including myself, discovering what thiols are, coming up to speed with where you're at with thiols. You've worked with them with winemaking and different flavors and aromas that you have from past history of even within your family. You've got a winemaker in your family. Yep. And so you really know quite a lot about thiols. And so where does Cry of the Coast sit amongst those, and what are thiols?
Let's start with what are thiols, because at the moment it's just a word, isn't it? So thiols are a really flavour active compound that is in nature. So if you think about tomato leaves, black currants, those really pungent aromas are thiols. So the classic in the alcoholic beverage sphere is the Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc is sometimes described as tomcat pea on a gooseberry leaf, which is nice
Yummy.
and bad. But those aromas, all of those names are ones that you'd attribute to thiols. And we describe those as free thiols because you can actually smell them. Their threshold of those is parts per trillion. So they can be detected by the nose at really, really low levels. That's one drop in a swimming pool.
The bound and versus free. So hops like the hops in Cry of the Coast, Simcoe, Mosaic.
Yeah.
Some of those, Simcoe being classic West Coast hoppy IPA hop, and Mosaic kind of New World hop. It's becoming a classic more as the years go on. Do those have bound or free?
So if you look at the really expensive modern IPA hops, like you just described, Mosaic, Simcoe, Nelson Sauvon, Citra, they're the hops with the biggest concentrations of free thiols in the hop oil.
Right.
So yeah, those fruity characters that people are paying top dollar for the hops because those things are loaded with free thiols.
Right. Yeah.
So this beer was about showing off free thiols, so people got where we were coming from. So the fruit notes in this are from Simcoe and Mosaic.
Right. And then the bound thiols, you've told me we've got bound thiols that are in malt that by theory should be able to be converted to become free so that we can smell them. And so am I right in thinking that this whole project is all about not just in malt but also in some other hops, that maybe noble hops like Saaz or Tettning, or maybe these have bound thiols that if they're released, if they're transformed, then we start smelling passion fruits and guavas and lychee. Yeah. Is that kind of the goal? Is see how we can unbind these bound thiols?
Yeah. So on the hops front, the three kind of highest that is out there in the literature are Calypso, Cascade, and Saaz, and they're not ones that you normally necessarily attribute to super fruity. In their own, they're not as pungent and in your face as the Mosaics and the Citras. Specifically the Saaz, that's very much a noble hop and comes across as grassy and
including the fruit notes that are in those, because they all have a level of fruity note, but like you were just saying, different types and different levels, but they would not just get amplified, they'd be transformed into other fruit character.
Yeah, so the kind of the thiols that we hope to release from those are going to be in that citrus, grapefruit, passion fruit, guava, blackcurrant, leaf. All those really pungent and different thiols smell of different things. So just the aim is to really to get to those tropical guava and passion fruit, I suppose, would be the holy grail of that.
Great. I'm real interested in trying this beer again and going to crack it open now.
Hold on a minute. We've got a problem here. I think these guys are running their own podcast here, Dave. We've got some competition. What's going on?
I know. That's a bit seriously slick, wasn't it? I'm sort of hoping they'll just stick to brewing the beers and we can just
stick with the beers.
Talking about them.
No, I'm looking forward to this after their explanation. I think I'm a bit the wiser. But, for anybody who just thinks that beer is beer and tastes like beer, when you hear things like we've just heard, you sort of starts the cogs whirring, and there's a lot more involved here, isn't there?
The sort of idea of there being beers which it's more prevalent in and you unlock it, that makes sense. That's sort of it's not basic science, but it makes sense as science that you would dissect something to find out absolutely everything. The bit I find really interesting is not being content with that, but then thinking, oh, well, there's other hops that you would have never associated them that they can do something like be fruity or something. Let's find out what they do. That's sort of mad scientist.
It's a whole new ball game, isn't it? It really gets you thinking and what else is possible in the beer world that hasn't been found yet? Where does it end? Right, well, I'm pouring mine. You've poured yours. So this is 5.5%. As you've heard, it's called Cryo the Coast, collab with Siren and Wild. It's the third beer in this series, exploring thiols. What do you make of it, Dave?
I haven't tried it yet, but it's also just worth pointing out all of the talk we've just heard there about how they're trying to bring out these real sort of fruity notes in beers. And the beer that they've chosen for the third beer is a West Coast Pale. Well,
yeah, exactly. You wouldn't associate those deep fruit notes with the West Coast, would you?
No, and it actually smells unlike any West Coast I've smelled.
Oh, yeah, wow. When you smell a West Coast IPA, you usually get resonance notes, don't you? Lots of pine. This smells completely the opposite of that, but while still being pretty much clear, as you would expect a West Coast to be.
Yeah, I always think of pine, resin, grass.
Oh my goodness!
And toffee, apple, and caramel in a West Coast. I've now tasted a bit of mine, and I don't know if I get any of those.
I don't think I get any of them. No, if you drank that blind, as I often say,
I'd never say it was a West Coast.
No way is that a West Coast, is it?
If it was blind.
That's really clever.
No.
That's really clever.
Yet, try it again, or give it another couple of goes, and there is just a bit of a dryness starts to creep in.
Right, okay. Right at the very back, right at the very end. Yes. That dryness lingers at the back of the throat. Didn't with the first hit.
It does, doesn't it? So it feels like it's coating a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit tanniny almost.
But there's no doubt in that big fruit rush at the start there. You can smell it and you can taste it straight away.
Yeah. And then it gives way to more traditional stuff, but quite gradually. Now, for me, 3 in, it's getting more West Coast each time I go back to it. It's fascinating.
I wonder what your traditional West Coast fans would make of this.
Well, it's tricky, I guess, because if you say, well, give it a chance and it tastes like a West Coast, they'll be like, well, why doesn't it taste like a West Coast to start with? But it does taste like a West Coast. I'm interested to see what happens the longer you leave it.
Let's go over to Brett and Sam now. They're going to open their can, so let's see what they have to say.
So this is Cryo the Coast.
We've built on the previous thiol project, so we tried out mash hopping in the second release, Thiology, where we used some Sart's Lupamax pellets in the mash, and I just found that gave amazing flavour, not necessarily aroma or more free bound thiols in the worked for release, but just the flavour was so amazing that we wanted to do that again. So we used Cryo Cascade in the mash and throughout the whirlpool bit in the kettle, and then we went with Yorkshire Square ale yeast, which I tried it on Thiology on a trial basis, and really liked the estery character that it gave. And one of the things we'd found from Release the Stars was that we weren't getting the esterification of the thiols, which can really enhance that passion fruit guava side of the thiol expression.
I'm also noting that we're drinking this beer slightly warmer, well, definitely warmer than what you would get at a off draft at a pub or from your refrigerator, and I think that might be helping.
That just makes it more flavour active.
Yeah,
the warmer a beer will be, the more character and flavour you'll get out of it. All flavours will be enhanced though, so if there were any off flavours, then they would also be enhanced. But
yeah. So maybe to really get all these characters, would recommend take it out of the fridge for 10 minutes, then drink it. I would recommend still drinking it cool, but maybe cooler than room temperature. Definitely not 20 degrees in the crazy heat wave that we've just had. The name Cryo the Coast is referring to a hop product that we use called Cryo hops, and that was from Yakima Chief. What they've been doing and what they've discovered was they were able to take more than half of the plant matter out of the hop and leave all the goodness, the resins and the hop character, the lupulin glands in it, and they call it cryo powder because they do it at more of a cryogenic temperature. So what we get is a hop pellet that is twice as powerful as our typical hop pellet, with less green vegetal matter, and so we used a lot of cryo hops in this, and the Coast is referring to the Siren brand and company.
Right, so there you are. You've heard that they recommend you take it out the fridge and leave it for a little while. So as has been sat here for a few minutes now, while we've been talking behind the scenes and while they've been talking to you as well, we had the Cryopop beer. Do you remember? Now,
yes.
That had an immense lot of fruit on the nose, but then didn't taste very fruity at all. The difference here is that this actually also tastes fruity to start with.
Yeah, that was from Left-Handed Giant, wasn't it, if memory serves?
That's right, yeah.
Now, interestingly, I've left mine as you have. I think it's possibly lost its initial fruity, punchy potency, and now that smells more like I would expect a West Coast to smell like.
Yeah. It's almost like two beers in one, isn't it? First few sips bordering on East Coast, then it slipped into a West Coast.
Slightly going the other way for me now, though.
Oh.
Now it smells West Coast to start, but it's gone a little bit fuller and a little bit sweeter in the middle to back end, and then it goes a little bit dry again.
I'll tell you what, this is a complex beer, isn't it? This is no ordinary straight up and down West Coast. In fact, while I've got a bit more into West Coast than you may be, if we see a West Coast in our fridge, we never really gravitate towards it, do we? We'll sort of push it to one side. It's never our go-to, but this has got something in there for everybody, I think.
Would it win me round to trying West Coast's full stop? Probably not.
Well, not every West Coast is going to taste like this, is it?
No, but what it does do is it wins me round to trying whenever the next in this series comes out that's talking about thiols. And if other breweries are going to start talking about these and doing stuff with this is really interesting to sort of the beer geek within me here. Like, it's just a really interesting concept, and what flavours profiles can you develop from it?
Should say that this is readily available on Wild's website. I mean, I can't endorse that enough. That's great, isn't it?
As I say, you know, they contacted us, so we're not just blowing smoke because we got contacted and got given a free beer.
Not at all, no.
It is a really interesting beer. It might not be quite for everyone, and I will happily say it's not quite for me in the sense that it's just because it's West Coast still. It's not absolutely what I would always pick out, and I probably wouldn't have picked this beer out normally. Like, if I'd have seen this on the shelf going for a beer shop or something, I wouldn't have got it. So I would just read West Coast Pale and go, okay, and move on.
But this sort of begs a question. Should we always be swayed one way or the other by what style the beer says it is? Because one person's West Coast IPA is not the same as the next person's West Coast, is it? And the same with any other style. Look how many different styles of fruited sours we've come across over the months. You can't just say, I don't like fruited sours, because dozens and dozens of different ones out there made by different people that all taste different.
No, it's been quite an eye-opening episode for me in that sense, because obviously I've had sours and I've had a West Coast IPA, which, you know, I would never normally gravitate towards, but it just goes to show what you can be missing out on if you don't sort of move out of your lane occasionally.
I think we're going to have to get these guys from Wild on for a bit of a chat to talk more to us, Dave, at some point.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I would assume a lot of people listening to this will know what Wild do, and while they have their sort of core range and things like that, some of their stuff in bottles, which has been around for a lot of years now, they've been experimental for a long time, and some of their stuff is really out there, really interesting. I'd love to sort of talk to them about those kinds of beers especially.
Now, they've got lots of good ideas. We're going to leave you with the guys once more for a few ideas on what you might like to pair your beer with.
Just before you do that, what would you pair this beer with?
I think it would go with something nice and spicy.
Okay. Mine's really basic. I would have it with Pringles, ready salted Pringles.
Oh, okay. Do you know, right, okay, I nearly said crisps. Then I was going to say some sort of spicy crisps. So we weren't too far away from each other there. I think something with a bit of spice in. But yeah,
nice.
Anyway, here are the guys with some fun ideas of what to do when you get hold of this beer.
So yeah, Cry the Coast. Drink it, crack it open, drink it in the pool, drink it in the kitchen, drink it with a burger, with a pizza, with lobster bisque. You could drink this with Mexican food, Thai food. Be really good with Thai food. Fish and chips.
Yeah, even good with fish. Just nice bitterness to cut through the grease.
You could drink it. Awesome. You could drink it while you're working. You could
into the night.
Enjoy it into the night while you're on a boat. Cry the Coast. But honestly, thank you very much for this opportunity to share this beer. Cheers. Have a good one.
You're listening to Dave B and Dave D on Daft About Craft, the craft beer podcast.
Well, we mentioned at the start of the podcast today that we've got a brand new feature, and we have. It is called The Brewer's Wife. Now, regular listeners to Daft About Craft will know we speak a lot about Copper Beach Brewing Company from Kidderminster. And, well, look who's here. It's Sam, one half of Copper Beach.
Hello.
Here she is. This is interesting, isn't it?
Thank you for having me.
It's all right. We got to know Sam through the podcast when Copper Beach first came on the radar, and we interviewed Sam and her husband Dan, who's the brewer for Copper Beach, and then they had their own standalone episode because we talked for so long, and now we know them really well, and we thought, let's get Sam onto the podcast at a regular spot where she can talk to us about life as a brewer's wife. What is life as a brewer's wife like?
Oh, where would I even begin to answer that question? It's hectic, that's for sure. Luckily, now that we're in a commercial space, it's less messy. But obviously, for a long time, as you're aware, it was all going on in our home.
You didn't enjoy all the boxes of beers everywhere in your house.
I mean, if I could have dipped into them as much as I wanted, then potentially.
That's true.
But no, it was it was very cluttered for a long time there. So it has got a bit easier from that respect recently.
So you have a wealth of stories in your back catalogue about life with Dan and life as a brewer's wife. Now, these are all sorts, from funny stories to serious stories about mental health and all this sort of thing. So each episode we're going to get you on and you're going to tell us one of your stories. So what have you got for us this time? What are you going to start off with?
Okay, so I thought I'd start with a bit of vintage Copper Beach. So this is going back to Dan's days as a home brewer. So, I mean, I don't know how most brewers start out. I'm assuming a fair few of them start out by brewing in the garage or the kitchen or wherever else. So, yeah, the same was true of Dan. You know what Dan's like. He's a bit fanatical once he gets a hobby.
Yeah.
So,
Aren't we all? Well,
if he really cares about something, he's really interested in something, then he takes it, all the way. So, every day there was a package arriving. It would be a book from Amazon, a piece of equipment from somewhere or another. And yeah, he's really sort of spent a lot of time levelling up the home brewing side of things before he even thought about going commercial. So yeah, one day this massive box arrived and it was this big mouth bubbler, I'm pretty sure it was called.
Right, okay.
Which is like a big glass carboy, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not here to pretend I know anything about brewing, really.
We don't know much either.
But it was this big glass carboy and he was very, very excited to use it for the first time. So I really wish I could remember what he brewed, but I haven't got a clue whether it's one that's made it into the actual final Copper Beach Cup
that'd be
so
cool
far.
If it had.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to ask him and let you know. But anyway, so he brewed for the first time and he filled this glass carboy and in the spare room it went, which is where all of the brewing equipment was at that time, once it had started overflowing the kitchen. And anyway, sort of not long after, he was going, "Where's my grey hoodie? I need my grey hoodie." I'm going, "What grey hoodie?" So, "Yeah, the grey one I just need my grey zip-up hoodie." So I don't know where he's going or why he needs this hoodie so bad, but I said, "Well, I don't know, let's look for it." So anyway, he managed to find this hoodie and I didn't think much of it. So again, I'm not going to pretend to know anything about brewing, but within the first 24 hours that this beer was in this glass carboy, this big mouth bubbler, it does, I guess, it starts to ferment.
Yeah.
And at the top of it, it's got a little plastic tube and you can see the bubbles start forming. Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know, we had a baby recently. And I would say that Dan checked on the baby less than he checked on the bubbles coming out of the top of this. Excellent. He was so excited about these bubbles appearing. Anyway, so he says, about 24 hours later, "Come on, you've got to come and see. You've got to come and see it's working. You've got to come and see these bubbles." So in I walk into the spare room and there it is in the corner, this glass carboy dressed in Dan's grey zip-up hoodie. Yeah. Now, I have no idea. I think it's maybe something to do with, it's either keeping the light out or keeping the warmth in. It was on a heating pad as well. So he'd got a heating pad as well. And yeah, there it was dressed up in this grey hoodie and it was just so funny.
Does he look after Delilah as well as that now or not? Or is he still always that? His devotion to the beer, was that more than Delilah?
Oh, I'm going to have to be careful how I answer
that. That is true.
He loves Delilah dearly. Does he pay as much care and attention? I don't know, but he doesn't have to sell Delilah to the public, does he? So.
This is true. And
also he's got me to fall back on when it comes to her. It's safe to say he pays a lot of care and attention to the brewing side of things anyway. But yeah, this blooming hoodie. I've got a picture of it.
Have you still? Does the hoodie still exist?
I think I'm sure we've still got the hoodie somewhere. But yeah, I've got a picture of it. I'll have to show you. You'll have to whack it on the Instagram so everyone can see.
We'll get this up on Instagram so you can all see it. Now, you see, the thing is, I want more stories now. So while you're here, let's have another story.
Have you heard about how Metamorphosis came to be? The beer, Metamorphosis?
I think I know, but I'm not sure everybody else does. So yeah, go on. This is a good one.
Okay, so one day, Dan, when the brewery was still at the bottom of the garden in the shed, he got up early one morning, as he often did, and went down to brew. So he did all of the base, which is kind of like using the grain bill and getting all that sorted. And I'm just in the house, probably just sat watching telly, to be honest.
Love Island.
A bit of Love Island. Married at First Sight. I was going to say Married at First Sight Australia. And he comes charging in to the living room. And he's sweating.
I can just imagine him sort of huffing and puffing. Yeah.
He's sweating, he's red, and he's like, I've started to brew birdie. I'm like, yeah. I haven't got the hops. I'm like, now listen, I'm not one to judge, but as a brewer, I feel like the first thing you would do.
Yeah, make sure you've got everything.
You know, if you're making anything, you generally check if you've got the ingredients first. Now, I think he did use some sort of computer system to track his ingredients. Yeah. Obviously failed him. I don't know what to do. I've done the whole base. I've got the whole base for birdie. And I don't know what to do. I haven't got the hops. I said, okay, have you got hops? Any hops?
Any hops?
Yeah. Okay, well, what could you use instead? Now, it's funny because Dan is such a good problem solver. And I really mean that. He's so good at solving problems, but not under pressure.
If there's a problem, he's got a spreadsheet to help sort that problem, hasn't he?
Absolutely. But there'll be problems that he's anticipated, problems that he's kind of planned for, not things that come up to just panic him out of left field. So, you know, once you give him that suggestion, that take a step back and think, what can you do?
Yeah, think logically.
Then, because I think at this point we were trading, so it was a proper... You know, it was meant to be a web shop batch of beer, so he couldn't have chucked it. Off he went to check what hops he had. I wish I could remember what was in Metamorphosis actually, but that's what it ended up being.
Yeah,
so that he whacked the hops in and said, well, we'll just have to see what it comes out like, and if we can sell it, then great, and if we can't, then it's a lesson learned.
And it is a really good beer as well, isn't it?
It is. Well, I think we're going to make it a cask beer as well, now that we're in the unit. Okay. Yeah, it might be one that goes into cask, so that's exciting. And yeah, without that little calamity, it wouldn't even exist.
There's another story about Dan and his hops. Do you remember the time that Talus, which is the family tree hop, mistakenly got put into another one of his beers?
Wow, I mean, this is a conspiracy theory that we'll never get to the bottom of. So he is convinced that one of his batches of birdie, and probably a favourite batch, he was sent Talus instead of Simcoe. He's pretty sure.
Yeah, was he sent it instead of Simcoe, or did he order the wrong one, or put the wrong one in?
At that point, we didn't use Talus.
Oh, that's true.
So yeah, at that point, he wouldn't have ordered it, but he thinks it got sent by mistake.
And that's sort of how Family Tree then came about, because of that using the wrong hop.
Yeah, that's how that recipe started. He said, well, actually, if that is Talus, I really like Talus.
We'll like that.
I want to explore brewing with it. And yeah, Family Tree, which is just a cracker of a beer, which is being brewed today, actually, as we speak.
Yeah. It does make you wonder how many other breweries go through things like this and just stumble across beers.
Not many, surely.
No, I don't know. I've got a feeling that it happens a lot.
It's quite a good little tale, though, isn't it?
It is excellent.
Anything that ends in a story, we're okay with.
Yeah, it's a story for the QR code anyway, isn't it?
Exactly. It was quite hard to name it, though, but obviously Metamorphosis.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect, isn't it?
It's where that came from.
Daftaboutcraft.
Right, well, we're coming to the end of episode 32, which means, which feature haven't we done? I know.
And now it's time for Hype or Tripe.
Of course, Hype or Tripe. I can see that Dave is sitting there in his spare room in Suffolk looking a little bit anxious about this beer.
I'd say that's fair. I would say that is a fair description. I'm slightly nervous about this beer.
But, right, it's a Tiny Rebel beer. Now, Tiny Rebel have appeared on the podcast previously. And the thing with Tiny Rebel is, we've all had their beers at some point in our craft journey. Maybe some of us now feel that we're beyond Tiny Rebel, if you want. We've had the Tiny Rebels. We like to find more obscure stuff now. They're a bit too mainstream and all this business. We probably fit into that category, don't we, Dave?
We do. And as you were saying that, I was thinking that's such an unpopular stance for me to take amongst like some of my friends, because I know full well that some of my friends really like Tiny Rebel stuff.
I seem to recall one of your friends brought some Tiny Rebel to your wedding, actually.
Exactly. People really do like it.
Yeah.
They've carved out their niche, more than carved it. In fact, just go back to my friends, I know that a couple of them went to the Tiny Rebel tap room only probably 6 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Loved it. Thought it was a brilliant experience, really good with all the beers on tap, really big place, really nicely done.
It is worth going to have a look if you've never been there.
Yeah, so they are doing well for themselves. It's perhaps our inner snob is showing a bit.
Yeah, maybe we're the ones with the problem,
Well, it is quite possible.
Wouldn't be the first time, would it? I've got to say, before I crack open this beer we've got, well, I should tell you what it is actually. It's Triple Tropica, which is the amped up version of Club Tropica, which used to be called Club Tropicana, which they had to change the name of due to a cease and desist, I think, wasn't it, Dave?
I believe so, although I just still think of it as Club Tropicana.
Yeah, exactly.
And always will do, so.
A tropical IPA, which I've had many times and enjoyed. I've had it in can from the supermarket. I think I've had it there at Tiny Rebel and also in other pubs as well. If I go to a pub and there's not much on offer and that's there, I'll always go for it because I know it's solid.
I think my anxiety stems from what they did to another very good beer they had called Stay Puffed, which they ran
you didn't like the ham and cheese version or whatever it was.
I get it for the novelty factor, but maybe just leave. When you've got a good thing, you don't necessarily have to reinvent it each time.
In fact, it was one of the Stay Puffs we did on Hype or Try some time ago, wasn't it? I think we suggested maybe that Stay Puffed had reached the end of the line and they should just stop doing these fancy versions and just go back to the original.
I believe we had the one which was the beer to mark the end of sort of lockdowns and whatnot, wasn't it?
Was that Stay Out Puffed?
Yeah, Stay Out, which was...
Stay Out, yes, that's it.
It was something insane like, was it 13, 14%, something like that? And it tasted very metallic-y. That's the thing I remember of it.
But what is interesting is that I'm not sure they've done any more versions of it since that one. So
yeah, that's true.
So... maybe they have drawn a line under it and the silliness has stopped. Anyway, look, we could talk all day about this. Let's open the beer, shall we?
Yeah. So what I'm expecting here and what I'm hoping is I just need it to be an amplified version. I just want it to be super fruity, not sickly sweet, but I expect it to be pretty sweet, pretty full. Oof. Probably can I finish a whole can of it? I don't know. On a school night, we might chance in our arm a bit, but we'll see. That's what I want. I just don't want it to be rubbish, basically.
Well, it's 10% instead of 5.5%, so it's pretty much double the strength. Just open the can there. It's from a distance, it smells like orange squash concentrate. It smells very pungent. But having said this, I've not tasted it yet, but it's got around 1,000 reviews on Untappd, and the average mark is around 4 out of 5. So it's been well received by people. Not by you on the smell of it, though, by the looks of it.
I'm with you on that. When you go, you get the cheap squash from the supermarket, the double concentrate stuff.
Yeah, it smells like that.
It smells exactly like that.
Right, now, that's okay, because,
I suppose it shouldn't it, in some ways?
So what we're saying is it's massively fruity on the nose, which is what we want, isn't it? Yeah. Now, we just don't want it to taste too sweet. God, we're demanding, aren't we?
Oh, it's very sweet. That's, it's almost gone... It's gone sort of weirdly flumpy, marshmallowy sweet in the middle for me. I think for my palate, it's probably sickly sweet.
Oh, it's reminded me of a sweet. Is it a refresher or something like that? Swizzle?
Swizzle, yeah, it is a little bit. It's a little bit like both of those. So, back in the day, if you got your sweets and you get your penny sweets and all your things like that, like your refreshers and whatnot, and then you take them home in the brown paper bag, so they'd have had a bit of time to all be sat next to each other. Mm-hmm. You'd open the bag up. Yeah. Well, it smells like that. And then if you ate all of the sweets at the same time, it tastes like that. There's not really a discernible flavour for me apart from sweet.
Are you finding it goes a bit dry at the back?
It does go a bit bitter.
Yeah, a bit dry and bitter. And I don't recall that being the case with the original at all.
The original was, like, especially on draft, super smooth. Yeah, I know where I am with this beer.
I'm really fascinated. We've got a listener called David Price, who's a big fan of the podcast. He's left us lots of lovely reviews over the time on various platforms. And I know he's a big Tiny Rebel fan. He's got one of those machines you can buy and dispense your own beers from them. He's a big fan of Tiny Rebels, so he's bought a lot of Tiny Rebels over the last few months. So he's been serving himself Tiny Rebels at home from keg. I would love to know what he makes of this. if you're listening, Dave, let us know. Drop us a line. Be really interested to see your take, because obviously you've had the Club Tropica. I tell you what, the colour in the glass looks awesome. I love the colour. It's quite it's not a deep orange or anything. It's the colour I associate with the original Club Tropica. It just goes a little bit wrong when you taste it. It's just a bit of a sweet mess.
I think a sweet mess is a fair description. It's just a bit like a sweet shop explosion, and not in a good sense. And as I say, perhaps it is just me being very snobby, which I perfectly accept could be a reason, but it's just not very refined.
We had the triple IPA from Cloudwater and Time and Tide on the last episode. That was a 10% triple IPA. With the greatest of respect, the difference between that beer and this beer, they're leagues apart.
Yeah, that's very well put. It does what it says, doesn't it?
But it does. And, the two breweries are aiming at a completely different demographic as well, I think.
Yeah. Again, very fair. You're putting forward a very reasoned argument as to why you could say...
We never just... It's not our aim on this podcast to just slate beers for the sake of it. We like to come up with some decent arguments. And I think Tiny Rebel, being Tiny Rebel, are an easy target for bods like us to just slag off. So I'm very keen that we don't do that. And I think we've offered a balanced viewpoint here.
I didn't think it was necessarily unreasonable to just want a slightly more intense, really full, sweet but not overpowering version of the original beer. And for me, this just misses the mark. It's just gone a bit too sweet, and it's just sort of...
I think the problem with Tiny Rebel is when they do these big beers, their birthday beers or special celebration beers, it's almost as though, right, how strong can we make this? Let's get it as strong as we can. You probably didn't need to take this beer to 10%. Maybe just to a double IPA version or just a slightly different version of the original beer. Just taking it a bit too far, I think. That's their need. That's what they do, though, isn't it? That's their calling card. They take things a bit too far, and that's fair play. That's got them a long way in the business. That's what they do, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, a Forest Fruits version of this, for example,
nice.
Back at its normal percentage, I'd have been all over that. I'd have certainly given it a good whirl.
I think what we're saying is here, for us, it's a bit of a fail. It's been a few months since we got off the hype train. We're on the tripe train this time.
Sadly so, but at the same time, I think if you like what Tiny Rebel do as their beers generally, I don't think you'll be disappointed.
It's not what we want to drink.
No, it's just probably not quite for us. But that's not to say it can't be for you or for someone else or a friend or whoever. Like, there'll be... Clearly, as you mentioned earlier, there's nearly 1,000 people who've already tried it who liked it. So it's definitely hitting the mark somewhere.
Absolutely. Just not quite for us. Must say thanks very much to Rich Vincent, who provided this beer for me. Friend of the podcast. He actually had this one. Somebody gave it to him, then he gave it to me. So it's done the rounds a bit, this beer. And sorry we didn't like it as much as we wanted to, but that's just the way these things pan out.
Daft About Craft, the craft beer podcast.
Well, thank you very much indeed for listening to this episode of Daft About Craft. Our episodes come out every 3 weeks, so if you want to hear the next one, tune in from August the 22nd. Until then, enjoy your summer, enjoy the weather, and enjoy your beer. We'll see you soon.